Morning sunlight spilled gently across the marble floor of a mansion in the quiet suburbs of Lagos. The house was still, except for the faint hum of the air conditioner and the rhythmic ticking of a gold clock mounted above the staircase. Dami Adewale, a man in his mid-30s and one of the city's youngest billionaires, stood by the tall window of his study, staring absently at the skyline. Success had come early to him. Real estate, tech investments, cars, prestige, yet something in his gaze hinted at restlessness. Down the hallway, the sound of light footsteps echoed. It was Sarah, the young housekeeper who had joined the household less than a year ago. She was quiet, diligent, and respectful, the kind of worker who blended into the background yet kept the house running like clockwork. Dami glanced at the framed photo on his desk, his wife, Tola, smiling beside their little daughter, Tammy. Tola had been away for months, working on a music project in Paris. The distance had started to weigh on him, though he would never admit it. As he straightened his tie and picked up his phone, a thought crossed his mind. I need to talk to Sarah about Tammy's school schedule and that broken air conditioner. It was meant to be an ordinary morning, but in the next few minutes, a single unplanned moment would quietly begin to change everything. Damie walked down the long, polished corridor, his thoughts still half lost in the morning's business calls. He held a tablet in one hand, Tammy's school schedule, and was heading toward the guest rooms to check if Sarah had already prepared her daughter's uniform for the week. He reached Sarah's door and knocked lightly. No response. He hesitated for a second. Maybe she's downstairs, he thought. Without much consideration, he turned the handle and stepped inside. The door opened with a soft click. The moment that followed froze in silence. Sarah, standing by her wardrobe, turned abruptly in surprise, her eyes widening at the sight of him. Dami's own breath caught not because of what he saw, but because he instantly realized his mistake. I'm so sorry, he stammered, turning away at once. I didn't know you were here. I should have. It's fine, sir, Sarah interrupted quickly, her voice trembling slightly. She grabbed a blanket from her bed and held it close, more from shock than embarrassment. I thought I locked the door. I'm sorry, sir. Dami shook his head, still facing the door. No, please, it's my fault entirely. I just came to ask about Tammy's tablet, but it can wait. Take your time. He stepped back, avoiding eye contact, and closed the door gently behind him. Once outside, he let out a deep breath, pressing his palm against his forehead. Great. Just what I needed, he muttered under his breath, exhaling a nervous laugh that sounded more like disbelief than amusement. Inside the room, Sarah stood frozen for a moment, her heart still pounding. Did that really just happen? She thought, trying to steady herself. She sat down on the edge of her bed, staring at the closed door, her mind replaying the scene in flashes. Neither of them knew it then, but that brief, awkward encounter would echo in both their minds far longer than they expected. Dami descended the staircase slowly, one hand trailing along the smooth wooden rail. The house, once his sanctuary of order and calm, suddenly felt unfamiliar, as though the air itself had thickened with unease. He reached the living room, sat down on the couch, and stared at nothing. What was that? He asked himself silently. How could I have been so careless? He leaned back, pressing his fingers against his temples. He'd handled billion-dollar deals, faced investors twice his age, managed crises without breaking a sweat, yet one accidental moment had left him shaken. A soft voice broke through his thoughts. Daddy! Tammy came running down the stairs, her curls bouncing, her smile pure as morning light. Dami's expression softened immediately. He lifted her into his lap, holding her close as if the simple act could erase the heaviness inside him. You're okay, sweetheart, she nodded. When is Mommy coming home? He hesitated before answering. Soon, he said quietly. She'll be home soon. He smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. When Tammy skipped away to her cartoons, Dami leaned back again, whispering under his breath, What am I even thinking? She's just an employee. That's all. But even as he said it, he knew his mind would not let go that easily. This Cretius, Upstairs, Sarah sat by her small dresser, brushing her hair in silence. Her reflection stared back calm on the outside, storming within. Why do I feel so nervous? She wondered. He didn't mean to. It was just an accident. And yet, the way he had looked away respectfully, almost protectively, lingered in her thoughts. She sighed, trying to shake it off. Get a grip, Sarah, she whispered to herself. He's your boss, and that's it. But as much as she tried to return to her daily routine, the memory replayed again and again, not because of what had happened, but because of everything unspoken between them. That evening, the sky over Lagos burned orange with the last traces of sunset. Sarah sat by her window, lost in thought. The soft sound of cars from the distant street drifted in through the curtains, but her mind was far from the present moment. Her phone buzzed a message from Betty, her closest friend. Hey girl, you sound off today. Everything okay? Sarah hesitated before replying. Can you come over? I really need to talk. 30 minutes later, a knock came at the back door. Sarah let Betty in, and the two women made their way upstairs to her small but tidy room. Betty threw herself onto the bed, her usual energy filling the space. All right, spill it, she said, half smiling. You sounded like someone just saw a ghost. Sarah sat down beside her, wringing her hands. Something strange happened this morning, she began slowly. Mr. Adewale walked into my room by accident. Betty blinked. Your boss? Wait, what do you mean, walked in? He didn't realize I was inside, Sarah said quickly. It was completely unplanned. He looked shocked, apologized, and left right away. Still, it was awkward. Betty tilted her head, studying her friend's uneasy face. And how do you feel about it? I don't know, Sarah admitted. Embarrassed, mostly. But also, I don't know how to act around him now. He's always kind, but today felt different. Betty smirked lightly. You mean he looked at you differently? Sarah frowned. Don't make it sound like that. He's married, Betty. Her friend shrugged. I know, but he's also human. Look, I'm not saying do anything wrong. Just be smart. The way you carry yourself matters. People like him notice confidence. Sarah sighed. I'm not trying to impress anyone. I just want things to go back to normal. Betty smiled softly. Then act normal. But don't pretend you didn't notice something changed. Sometimes, life tests us in ways we don't expect. For a moment, silence filled the room. The hum of the ceiling fan was the only sound. Sarah looked at her friend, unsure whether Betty's words were meant as comfort or warning. Night fell quietly over the Adewale residence. The glow from the living room chandelier spilled across the white tiled floor as Dami sat on the couch, laptop open, his tie loosened after another long day. The television played softly in the background, but his attention drifted elsewhere. On the coffee table lay a framed photo of his wife, Tola, holding their daughter, Tammy, during last year's family trip to Dubai. The smiles in that picture felt like they belonged to another lifetime. His phone buzzed. A call from Tola. Hey, love. Her voice came, warm and bright through the speaker. Hey, he replied, leaning back. How's Paris? It's busy, as always. We're almost done with the recordings. 2 more weeks and I'll be home. That's good news, he said, smiling faintly. Tammy asks about you every day. There is onus for to take it. I miss her, Tola said softly. And you too, Dami. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence carried across the distance, comfortable, yet heavy with things unsaid. He cleared his throat. Just focus on finishing the project. We're proud of you. I will, she said. And you take care of yourself. Don't overwork, okay? I'll try, he murmured. When the call ended, Dami set the phone down and exhaled slowly. The warmth of her voice lingered in his chest, but so did the ache of absence. He looked around the spacious living room. Everything gleamed. Everything was perfect, yet the house felt unbearably empty. From upstairs came the soft sound of Tammy's laughter. He smiled, stood up, and climbed the stairs to her room. Hey, Princess, he said, poking his head through the door. Tammy looked up from her picture book and ran to hug him. Daddy, you promised ice cream, he chuckled. And I never break a promise. He handed her the small cup of strawberry ice cream he'd brought home. Her eyes lit up. Thank you, Daddy. He kissed the top of her head. Now finish your story and go to bed, okay? Big girls need their sleep. As he turned off the lights and stepped back into the hallway, Nami felt a wave of tenderness mixed with guilt he couldn't name. You have everything, he told himself. A family, success, love. Don't ruin it. But beneath the surface, a quiet unease still stirred, something he tried hard to ignore, but couldn't quite silence. The following morning arrived bright and calm, though neither Dami nor Sarah felt at ease. Sarah moved through the house with quiet precision, dusting, arranging, tidying, yet every sound seemed amplified, every footstep deliberate. She caught herself listening for the familiar rhythm of Dami's shoes against the marble floor, half dreading, half expecting his approach. Downstairs, Dami sat at the breakfast table with a cup of black coffee and the morning paper. But his eyes weren't really reading. His mind kept drifting back to the day before. The image of confusion on Sarah's face, the quick way she'd covered herself, the tremor in her voice, it all replayed, uninvited. Enough, he told himself. You're imagining things. Just then, Sarah entered the dining area carrying a tray of fresh fruit and toast. She hesitated for a moment when their eyes met, then quickly set the tray down. Good morning, sir, she said softly. Morning, he replied, his tone even, but his heartbeat wasn't. For a few seconds, silence stretched between them, polite, but heavy. Sarah straightened the tablecloth, her hands moving just a little too quickly. You can leave it there, Dami said. I'll handle the rest. Yes, sir. She nodded and turned to leave, but he called out again before he could stop himself. Sarah. She froze, turning slightly. Yes, sir? He paused, searching for words that wouldn't sound wrong. About yesterday. I hope you're not uncomfortable. It was an accident, and I'd hate for it to affect your work here. Her eyes met his for the first time that morning. It's okay, sir, she said quietly. I understand. Something in her calmness made him more unsettled than before. He gave a quick nod, then looked back down at his paper. As Sarah walked away, her chest felt tight. Why do I feel like everything's changed, even though we both pretended it hasn't? Later that afternoon, she passed by his office with a stack of freshly ironed clothes. The door was half open. Inside, Dami was on a call, his voice low, confident, steady the way she'd always heard him speak. But when he glanced up and saw her passing, his words stumbled for half a second. It was barely noticeable, but she caught it. And that fleeting hesitation said more than either of them would ever dare to admit aloud. Evening descended quietly, painting the city in shades of gold and violet. Inside the mansion, most of the lights had been dimmed. Tammy was already asleep, her small lamp glowing softly beside her bed. The house felt still, too still. Dami sat alone in his study, a glass of water untouched on the table beside him. He had tried to distract himself with work spreadsheets, contracts, unread emails, but his concentration broke every few minutes. The echo of Sarah's voice from earlier that morning lingered in his mind, polite but distant. He sighed, closing his laptop. You're losing focus, Dami. This isn't you. Down the hall, Sarah was finishing the last of her chores. She folded Tammy's clean clothes, arranged them neatly, and turned off the hallway lights one by one. Her steps slowed when she reached the end of the corridor near Dami's study. The faint light spilling from under his door made her hesitate. Inside, Dami rubbed his eyes, exhaustion pressing down on him. Then, as if drawn by instinct, he rose from his chair and opened the door. Sarah, he said, surprised to find her there. You're still up? Yes, sir, she replied softly. I was just making sure everything's set for tomorrow. He nodded. You've been working hard. I appreciate that. Thank you, sir. An awkward pause followed. the kind that sits heavy in the air, filled with words neither person dares to say. "Sarah," he began, his tone quieter now, "about everything that's happened lately, I just want to make sure we're okay. I value the trust in this house." She looked up at him, unsure how to respond. "We're fine, sir. Really." But her voice wavered slightly, just enough for him to notice. He smiled faintly, the kind that hides more than it reveals. "Good," he said. "That's all I wanted to hear." She turned to leave, but something about the moment made both of them linger a heartbeat longer than necessary. Two people standing in the same hallway, neither willing to move first, each caught in their own silence. Finally, Sarah broke it. "Good night, sir." "Good night, Sarah." She walked away, and Dami stood watching the empty corridor long after she had gone. He knew, deep down, that a line had begun to form, invisible, fragile, and dangerously close. And though nothing had been said or done, the pull of that unspoken moment would not fade easily. The days that followed carried an unusual tension through the mansion. Everything seemed the same on the surface: the polished floors, the quiet rooms, the routines of cleaning and preparing meals, yet underneath, a fragile unease had begun to grow. Dami found himself distracted more often than not. At work, his decisions were careful, precise, but his mind kept wandering back to Sarah. Every time she entered a room, he caught himself pausing, noticing the smallest details he had never really considered before: the way she moved, her expressions, her quiet confidence. Sarah, on her side, felt a strange mix of pride and unease. She was aware of the attention, but she had no desire to act improperly. Yet, each encounter with Dami reminded her of the delicate balance they were walking, a line drawn so thin it threatened to break with a single misstep. The household began to notice the subtle changes. Tammy asked more questions than usual: why her parents were so busy, why her nanny looked so quiet sometimes, why her father seemed distracted. Even small misunderstandings in daily tasks started to create friction between staff members, though none could pinpoint why. One afternoon, an argument erupted over a minor mistake: a misplaced package, an incorrectly folded piece of clothing. Both Dami and Sarah found themselves unusually tense, their patience thinner than usual. The quarrel ended quickly, but the emotional weight lingered. Later that night, Dami sat in the living room alone, reviewing documents, but he could not concentrate. The quiet house offered no relief, only a mirror of his own thoughts. One wrong glance, one unintended moment, and everything becomes fragile, he reflected. Upstairs, Sarah stared out her window at the city lights, the distant hum of traffic mixing with the echo of her own worry. "I have to be careful," she told herself. "One mistake could ruin everything: his trust, my job, our reputations." Neither of them realized how much that single, unplanned encounter had shifted the equilibrium of their lives. From that day forward, every interaction carried a weight neither had asked for, and every word or glance had the potential to tip the balance. In a house built on routine and control, the human element had begun to challenge the structure, quietly, persistently, and dangerously. Weeks passed, and the mansion slowly returned to its outward appearance of calm. The routines were followed, meals served, rooms cleaned, and lights dimmed at the usual times. Yet both Dami and Sarah had changed quietly, each carrying the memory of that tense period, like a shadow that would not fully lift. Dami realized something crucial one evening as he watched Tammy sleep peacefully. The fleeting moments of distraction, the inner conflicts, the temptation to act on unspoken feelings, none of it was worth compromising the life he had built. He understood that true strength lay in restraint, in honoring commitments, and in valuing trust above impulse. Sarah, on her side, discovered the same truth from her perspective. She could have let her curiosity and the subtle attention she received lead her into trouble, but she chose professionalism, boundaries, and dignity instead. In doing so, she preserved her self-respect, her reputation, and the harmony of the household. The tension between them softened naturally over time. Their interactions remained polite, efficient, and sometimes warm, but always measured. Each had learned to navigate the fine line between human emotion and responsibility, a lesson that would shape them far beyond the walls of the mansion. And in the quiet moments, Dami sometimes reflected on the experience with humility. Life will always test us, he thought. What matters is not the temptation, but how we respond. Sarah, too, would occasionally pause by her window, letting the city lights remind her that integrity and self-control often carry the greatest reward. She smiled softly, knowing she had faced a challenge without letting it define her. In the end, both of them had grown wiser, steadier, and more aware of the delicate balance between desire and duty. And in that growth, the house finally felt truly peaceful again,